Thanks for having me on today. So I'm actually not representing the YWCA today. I'm taking off that hat and I'm just sharing my lived experience. So I grew up in generational poverty, and so we define that as generation of 5 years or more in poverty. And I was actually raised by my dad. My mom was an alcoholic, and my dad chose to sort of figured out that that wasn't right to live in. So he raised my sister and I in pool halls all across Canada. So two little girls hanging out in pool halls, that's not quite the storyline that most people hear. It actually came in handy in college because that's how I made my dinner money. So, but moving along, obviously I wasn't taught a lot of the skills that were required to sort of merge into our communities. We moved around so many times. I probably had about 10 to 15 different homes in different various communities across Ontario and Canada. So when it came time to become a teenager, we were in Penetang, Ontario, and not a lot to do there. School became sort of a focus for me. I had a bit of a drive to try and educate myself, and I always believed that the world was bigger than a pool hall. So I knew that education was going to help that. But the struggles of not knowing what was for dinner that evening and raising my younger sister in a very abusive home was very challenging at best. So socially, I just didn't know how to make friends. And obviously with all the moving we did, there was just really no point to hanging on to anyone. We had moved to Huntsville at one point when I was 13, and I had fallen in love with it. We were there for about a year, and I remember standing on the bridge at lunch saying, one day I will be back, because my dad had just announced again that we would be moving, and that was the year we moved to Penetang. So moving forward from Penetang to Barrie, I lived in Barrie for about 17 years. I went to Georgian College for Fine Arts. It was always a passion of mine to become an art psychologist or an art therapist. And I wanted to work with young adults and kids that struggled with stability and understanding abuse and just how the world worked. And I ended up becoming pregnant with my now 19-year-old. So I'm a single mom of two, 19 and 9. And it was a difficult relationship. I guess I just hung on to the fact that this person was providing basic need for me, which I just struggled with all the time. So we had moved to Eccles Street in Barrie, and it was one of my favorite homes. And the abuse was getting worse, and I knew that this was something I had to leave. So I ended up working 3 jobs to maintain this home so that my daughter would not have to move. I wanted stability because of my previous childhood. So I walked 5 kilometers a day to the Georgian Mall. That's where I worked, one of my jobs. And I ended up in a management position there with benefits, which, I mean, the day after announcing my separation, that was such a reward for me. So walking 5 kilometers a day was, you have to time management that. I also had a 5-year-old daughter that I had to get to before and after school, right? So thankfully it was along the way. Along the way, there was always some sort of barrier that would be just put in place. And I remember receiving on the last day of her grade 4 school year that they were moving the jurisdiction of her school, and I was going to have to walk another 30 minutes south and then backtrack. And I thought, there's no way that I can do this. There's just no way. My time management is so to the T, and thank God my firstborn was so cooperative. From 7 to 7:30 every morning, we had breakfast, we had lunch, we had snow pants on and out the door. And she may have cried once or twice, and I may have taken her by the straps of her snowsuit, but we got there. And this was just a monkey wrench. So I realized I had a great relationship with the secretary at the school, and she may have tweaked something for me in order for me to stay. And she usually shared that a lot of the times these letters would come in, the parents would come in angry and yelling. And then that's when I realized relationships were the form to actually obtaining resource. My language has always been a barrier because I put my foot in my mouth all the time, and I talk fast, and I panic. I suffered from anxiety my whole life. My boss that I had the management position with, she recognized that I had an anxiety disorder. And so when our store would be filling up with a lot of people. I worked at Gymboree. I don't know if anyone knows, in the Georgian Mall. I used to be there. It was a small store with many items, and she could see that I was becoming overwhelmed. She would ask me to step in the back and work through the boxes in the back, and then she would cover the floor. And it was something that I realized it's because of the relationship that we had, that it was a bit of flexibility in my position, and that rewarded me. And so my other boss, the other boss I had two jobs with. I worked at a bar on weekends till 4 in the morning. They actually formed a relationship to help me out, so that I didn't have to work an evening shift at this management position. I could go to my bar job, which actually helped me pay for my food and my hydro. So it was just these relationships that were forming that really connected me to understanding I can survive. So I did have an Ontario Works caseworker. I didn't like going. Very bridge, very like, this is government standards. We've got to do it this way. There's no flexibility. I'm sorry, but you are just not eligible for childcare anymore. And that threw the cliff effect into play. And so I ended up with finding another partner after 5 years. We moved in. I was pregnant. My then 9-year-old ended up having cancer. So during the time of her treatment, I was 7 months pregnant, living at Sick Kids Hospital. My management position, full support. They said, we're here for you. They raised funding for me because they knew that my daughter was taken care of. They worked on things for when I came out of the hospital with both my children. It would have been that long. It was such a supporting environment. All 3 of my jobs were just so rewarding because I built relationships with them, but they were flexible to understand that I was a person that needed that flexibility and understanding. So I had to then flee another abusive relationship after my partner, his mental health declined so rapidly that I'm now in Muskoka. I had to flee where I was living and the support and the surroundings that I had. I raised my 2 daughters in the shelter at Chrysalis for about 3 months. I had applied for district housing. And I remember forming a relationship quickly and promptly with the caseworker. And both of my caseworkers, because now I'm officially on Ontario Works. And my first caseworker, there was something so nurturing about the conversation that we had. I wasn't just another piece of paper. And I'm not saying that caseworkers all have this, everybody has that stress in their day and that understanding of, oh, another sob story is coming in, right? Like, it just feels like that to a person that is already living through trauma. So when you're asking those invasive questions, one after the other, and you're already in trauma, the language that may come out is going to be offensive or is not going to help an individual understand. If the caseworker is asking rigid questions because that's what's on the form, we know that there's going to be a communication barrier. So these are things that I actually started really grasping when I took Getting Ahead 2 years later. I managed to get my house in district housing, and the YWCA was hosting Getting Ahead for the first time, and I took it. It was 12 weeks of unpacking about 37 years of unknown. And of course, I'm crying in this class because there's other people sitting around this table that are living in poverty, faced with the same barriers of having to talk to people that are just not getting it. Or these are our caps. We make $733 a month on Ontario Works, and rent is, $900. That's not helpful. How can we change this? So the YWCA recognized, the value in my will to understand, and I love learning. And so they hired me as a co-facilitator. So the next year I actually got to sit on the other side, but with the lived experience, I gained trust quickly towards the participants that we could have even better conversations. And then in time, I joined Circles, and Circles Muskoka was probably the biggest stepping stone that I could have probably ever done. I used to say my life was like running around in circles. I needed someone to step in. And so here's Circles Muskoka. And I'm thinking, okay, I think this was destiny. And so our facilitator, our Circles coach and coordinator, Susan Lovell and Liz Angel, incredible women that just nurture and support. And I have 3 allies now that have just walked alongside me. They don't do it for me. They just walk alongside me to help understand employers' needs and help me to sort of break the communication barriers. These are things that a caseworker, they can offer their heart in small doses because they have many participants and they have to set their boundaries. But the allies in these programs are the ones that say, you can call me at 9 o'clock tonight if you are having A, B, C, and D problems, right? A caseworker can't offer that because we have structure, right? So we're breaking the walls in and understanding that it takes a village to raise a human, not necessarily a child, just we need that support from one another. So I know now the flexibility of the YWCA, our executive director, Hannah Lynn, is just so supportive and wonderfully understanding, and has attended Bridges many times because she has even shared, she relearns things based on the understanding. And so I had the honor of being hired as our circles coach for South Muskoka. And so the graduates from Getting Ahead that go on and need help, I get to walk alongside them and match them with amazing community partners. And it's just the most rewarding. Like, I look at my life and I think, oh, so this is why I lived in poverty all those years, to have this role. And I'm so honored to be able to do this. And with Bridges Out of Poverty, I got hired on to be the facilitator because of my lived experience. I'm able to break down the curriculum of Bridges and sort of share personal stories so that individuals will have that better understanding of, you know, the barriers that people in poverty are faced with. So I don't know, I have if you have questions on, you know, how I formed these relationships, even with my employers, being able to talk to one another, those were just key components to have more help for an individual to understand things. So I think I wanted to keep it really short. It's hard to unpack 42 years into like 5 to 10 minutes, but there you have it. You're welcome to call me or email me anytime. Thank you so much for your time today.